it's okay with you guys, I'd like to sit and kind of feel like it's more informal if I can sit here instead of feeling like I'm lecturing. Again, my name is Eric, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm also an academic counselor here at Santa Barbara City College. And when I was asked to give a talk about how I got here, I guess a couple things came to my mind, and it's questions that I'm always asked when students come in to get their academic counseling. They say, Eric, you know, a lot of students are struggling with what they want to be when they grow up, and they ask me, how'd you decide? How did you get here? And some of the things I usually end up telling people are, first of all, the path to becoming, for Eric, becoming a counselor, it wasn't a straight path and it wasn't a short one. And I think it wasn't straight and it wasn't short because I was one of those students who didn't know what he wanted to be when he grew up. And so I wandered quite a bit. Another thing I often tell people is that even though as I lived my life and got wrapped up in raising a family and doing life, one of the things that allowed me to end up where I am today is that I never gave up hope that I would be able to do what I wanted to do when I found out what that was. I knew I was always going to have to. Eric Flores needed to do it through college. I'm not creative enough to be an artist and to create beautiful things and make a living that way. I knew that I was academically inclined, and that's where I needed to be in order to find my place and to achieve whatever it was I wanted to achieve. So I never gave up the hope that I would find that. I always knew I wanted to work with people. I didn't know what that even looked like. So let me back up and give a little bit of detail to all that. So, given the fact that I'm one of these people who didn't know what he wanted to be when he grew up, it took me 10 years to finally get my bachelor's degree. You know, left high school, went to college, dropped out of college, got jobs, dropped out of jobs, went back to college. If you were to see my transcripts from the colleges I went through, it's nothing to be proud of. But I persisted. And like I said, 10 years after I graduated from high school, I finally got a bachelor's degree in social relations. And even the degree reflects how Eric didn't know what he wanted to do. In order to get a social relations degree, I had to study psychology, sociology, and anthropology. Things I love doing, but I still didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Graduate with a bachelor's degree, go out and try to find a job, really, really hard, especially if you want to get into the area of helping people. The jobs I was offered, I could not raise a family on. So I did what a lot of people do, and that's you join the workforce and you find a job that pays the bills. And that's what I did. I was hired at Pacific Bell. It used to be AT&T, and it became Pacific Telephone, and then became Pacific Bell. All the changes the phone industry went into. But I became a technician for Pacific Bell with a bachelor's degree in social relations. And I did that for about 17 or 18 years. And throughout that time, again, I never lost touch with school. I was always connected to school somehow, because I knew I didn't want to be 60 years old and a telephone man. There's nothing wrong with it, it's just that it's not what Eric wanted. So, fortunately, when I became a technician, I was, fortunate for me, I did most of my work I was living in LA at the time, and I did most of my work in South Central LA and Pico Union, all the rougher parts of the LA area. And those years I probably went into more houses than any social worker will have gone into in their entire career. And I saw some of the most amazing things. It was quite an experience to go into the many, many different kinds of homes with many different peoples of different ethnicities. And it was really a couple of things. It was never losing touch with my dream, and it was being exposed to all sorts of different stuff while I was a technician. And it was that way that me and counseling found each other. And that's how I phrase it. It wasn't like I knew I wanted to be a counselor. It's that I knew I wanted to work with people, and we found each other. And that's basically what, when we found each other, it was like, I'm going into all these neighborhoods that are rough neighborhoods. I see these people are struggling, and I want to work with these people. My job would also take me into schools, and I'd walk the hallways, and I'd hear the kids, and I'd hear the teachers, and I'd say to myself, gosh, you know what, I really want to be in a school. So what I did was I started researching, while I was a technician for Pacific Bell, I started researching master's programs. And I found a master's program at Cal State LA that was in the evenings, so that I could work my shift and go to school in the evenings. It was in the School of Education, and they had a marriage and family therapist option to a counseling training. And I would do my field work in schools. It all just kind of came together. It worked really well. So it was a 2-year program. It took me 4 years to do it because I was still doing the family thing, the Pacific Bell thing. It was a lot of sacrifice. It was a lot of work, but it was the best thing I ever did in my life, was to stay with it. And it was, I'm kind of losing track, but it was probably my late 40s when I graduated with my master's degree. And I quit Pacific Bell in September of 1998, and I got hired by LA Unified School District in September of 1998. I think I took 1 week off in between. And it's been wonderful ever since. Worked in schools all over South Central LA, the same neighborhoods that I worked as a telephone man, I went back to as a counselor. And it was the most fulfilling, greatest experience. I'm so glad that I did that. I'm so glad that we found each other, me and counseling. And it was because I never gave up, and because I put myself out there and just experienced as much as I possibly could. Did my 3,000 hours of marriage and family therapy internship, moved up here to Santa Barbara where I lived as a kid, started my practice, got my foot in the door here at Santa Barbara City College, actually doing volunteer work in the personal counseling department, and then kind of said, hey, I'd like to find out about academics. And they took me on over there and let me learn the ropes, and that's basically how I got here, doing therapy in our personal counseling, academics, and with my private practice.
Great, thank you. There's a chair.
We have a whole bunch of people who want to come join us.
Oh, good. Great. All right. That was great. Thank you, Eric. I really enjoyed hearing that. Our next presenter is Gordy Coburn. He is with the Alcohol and Drug Counseling Department here on campus. And take it away and welcome Sandy. We'll hear from you next. Thank you, Gordy.
Thank you. So it's nice to be here. So I got asked to do this this afternoon, and so I haven't had a lot of time to obsess about this. But just putting some things together. But when I was in college, back in Connecticut, I was an English major. And because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I wasn't much of a high school student, but English seemed to be my best subject, so I became an English major. I took some psychology courses and some other social science courses, but basically, I studied English. And when I got out of college with a BA, there weren't a lot of jobs, just back then either. And I remember traveling across the country with my girlfriend for most of that summer and doing some other things, but eventually I got hired as a billing clerk for a neighborhood health clinic in East Boston. And I did that for a few months, and then I was lucky enough to get hired by the prep school that I'd gone to in Connecticut as an assistant teacher. And that was kind of a break for me, but it was, and I've been doing that kind of work almost ever since. After that, I went to the Peace Corps, where I taught English as a second language in Korea. And when I came back, I went to seminary. And in seminary in Berkeley, I went to the Episcopal Seminary in Berkeley at the Graduate Theological Union. I took some counseling courses, and I began to get interested in counseling. And also, having been in the Peace Corps and a few other things, and gone through a divorce, I needed some counseling myself. And I got some very good counseling in Berkeley while I was there. And then eventually went back east and taught English again in and around where I grew up, in New York State and in Connecticut. And then eventually came out here to teach English at Cate School, which is in Carpinteria, not very far from here. And I taught English there for a couple of years, and some things changed. I went through another divorce. Sometimes I say it's not my license as a marriage and family therapist that qualifies me, it's my own experience with marriage and family failures. But anyway, I changed careers and got into recovery myself from alcoholism, and began, I needed another job, and so the first job I found was at Pinecrest Hospital. Pinecrest Hospital is now part of Cottage Hospital. It's the rehab, physical rehab center there on De La Vina Street. Well, back in the mid-'80s, it was Pinecrest Hospital, and it was a skilled nursing facility. It was also a chemical dependency unit, and it also had an eating disorder unit. But I only had 1 year of recovery, and they wouldn't let me work on the chemical dependency unit, but they hired me as the activities director for the skilled nursing. But I went to supervision with the MFT interns that were working on the chemical dependency unit. And when I had 2 years, they allowed me to do some interning there because I'd just begun an MA in clinical psychology at Antioch here. And so I was really changing careers, and in my 30s, changing careers. And not an easy thing to do, as Erica said. And having been an English teacher, I also had an MA in English. And then a few weeks after I started doing that internship, a job opening came at the care unit in Goleta. And the care unit was a franchised chemical dependency treatment program run by CompuCare all over the country. It was a 28-day residential treatment program for chemical dependency. And they hired me as a primary therapist. And that's really where I got my teeth cut. And I mean, I got thrown into groups that I didn't know how to do. But I'd had a couple of years of recovery, and I'd had some counseling courses before, and I kind of winged it, And most of our students now in ADC, alcohol drug counseling, have more experience than I did when I started there at the care unit. But I learned from experience, and also by that time was going to Antioch and learning about clinical psychology. And I finished at Antioch, and then came back over to what was now, used to be Pinecrest Hospital, was now Cottage Care Center, because Cottage had actually bought the place. And I worked in outpatient there for a couple of years, and then went back over to Goleta when they had a new program for adolescents called Pathways in the late 80s, early 90s. And then a recession hit and the phone stopped ringing. Oh my God. And so they closed the unit. And I went back east for a summer, and I worked on an outward bound expedition, which was also a treatment program for adolescent chemical dependence. And I was the lead therapist on that, and that was great, doing treatment in the wilderness. It was just wonderful. We were able to do things with the kids there that we hadn't been able to do, that we couldn't do in a clinical setting. And it was a lot of fun to do that. While I was there, my license came. And so in 1990, I was a licensed marriage and family therapist. And I worked for a few years at the Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse as the coordinator of counseling at Project Recovery from 92 to 95. Also trying to pull together a private practice, which isn't an easy thing to do. And eventually went into private practice for a while, worked in other treatment programs, then in 2000 got hired back at Cottage Residential Center, which was no longer at the in that building, but in another building. It wasn't called Cottage Care anymore, it was called Cottage Residential Center, now known as CRC. And I was a case manager there for 7 years. During that time, also, in the 90s, I started teaching in the alcohol and drug counseling program out at UCSB Extension. And that was great. And in 2001, we moved over here and became matriculated. And in 2003, I was named the coordinator of the program. We got accredited with the California Association for Alcohol and Drug Educators in 2006, and I got hired full-time as the chair of the department in 2007. And so I've kind of come full circle. I started out as a teacher, and I'm now a full-time teacher again, but teaching counseling. I love counseling. I really love counseling. I love teaching it, and sometimes I miss not being a counselor itself. But like Eric, I came to the counseling profession kind of through the back door. I mean, I didn't start out as a counselor. I started out as an English teacher, and then I wanted to be a minister, and then I wanted, and a lot of kind of dead ends. But I find that all the experience that I've had as an English teacher in theology and in English and in also psychology, all kind of helped me in my profession as a counselor, as a therapist, but also as a teacher. I use a lot of different things, and I find I'm really eclectic when it comes to counseling. If something works, I use it. So anyway, it's a wonderful, wonderful profession, and I really applaud anybody who wants to take this road. It's a hard road, but it's a very, very rewarding one. And so anyway, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Cordy. That was great. Next, we're going to welcome everybody. Try to find a seat or a piece of floor. There's, let's see, I don't know, there's standing room only. We're packed. Next, we're going to hear from Sandra Mistretta, known as Sandy.
Yeah.
Here. She was an intern right here in the Career Center, and you are a graduate of the ADC program, and you
She
are...
was our outstanding student last year.
Oh! And you're in the midst of your career path, so please share with us. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sandy. I apologize for being late. I'm going to stand up and push this back, but I was in staffing at my current position where I am an alcohol and drug counselor intern. So how many people here are studying in the ADC program and want to be an alcohol and drug counselor? Yeah? Okay, great. So I feel a little intimidated and honored to be up here with both of you. Thank you. And Kristen, thank you for asking me to speak. I came back to City College when I was 49 years old, and I'd worked retail for 30 years. I was a purchasing agent and a manager, and I was in the music industry, so it was a lot of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I took a lot of it seriously. And I ended up in rehab in Santa Barbara and restarted my life here at City College and at Casa Serena, which is where I work right now. So when I came back to City College, I actually came to the Career Center is how I got started on my path here. So I have a lot of fond memories here. And I thought, I'm going to change everything, and I'm going to change careers too. So I started out taking Italian, and I took one ADC class, and I discovered that I really liked being a student. And I was lucky enough to acquire an internship here at the Career Center, and I did that part-time while I got serious about the ADC programs. And I took quite a few classes with Gordy, and my experience at City College was illuminating and life-changing. You know, so everybody that I ran into that worked here was really supportive. You guys have probably all experienced that, right? You come into the Career Center, you go to financial aid, you know, you go down to admissions, and everybody's like, you can do it. And 49 years old, I felt like I was the oldest student here, but I wasn't, you know. And time goes by really quickly, and it really helped to have a plan. And what I did is worked here part-time, and I went to Casa Serena and asked if they had a part-time counseling internship. And of course they didn't do internships, because internships sometimes are hard to get because they spend a lot of time in training you and talking to you and, you know, and teaching you. And so I said, I'll take anything that you have. And so I volunteered my time as a project assistant, a PA. And when I was there, they saw the quality of work that I did, and I did anything, filing, answered phones, whatever it was. Whatever I saw that they needed, I was there. And when they called, I showed up. And pretty soon, a position opened up part-time as the Oliver House counselor, which is for women and children. And so I stepped into that. And I graduated from City College with my certification in last June, and I wore my cap and gown, and I was Phi Theta Kappa, and wow, what an experience. I just never thought that could happen to me. And the trajectory of my life has changed significantly. So I did the Bridge to Antioch program, which is, I started it in October after I graduated of last year, and I only have 3 more quarters left, and I'm gonna have my bachelor's degree. Because I found as an alcohol and drug counselor that I received an excellent education, and I was really prepared to go in to do that work. However, there's a lot of referring that goes on because there's a lot of co-occurring that happens in the ADC, you know, alcohol and drug arena. So I've decided to go forward and to get my master's degree through Antioch, and it's happening so quickly. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So I'll start my master's program in January there, and we'll see what happens. So while I've been working in the arena of Casa Serena, oh, and I brought some brochures, some of my personal business cards, and then some of my work business cards, which I'm really proud of. I took my internship state board maybe 4 months ago, and I have about 500 hours left before I'm an actual counselor. I'm still an intern, and that felt really great. So you guys, these are for you to help yourself with. But where did I just leave off? I lost my train of thought. I got all excited about my business cards. Anybody know where I left off?
Starting your master's degree.
Master's degree at Antioch. Oh, okay. So while I've been working part-time in a job that really they didn't have a part-time counseling, but it's kind of evolved, I've been offered 3 different positions where I work. And I've turned down full-time work because my education is my goal right now, because I'm 52 and I want to get my education under my belt. But my plan is to be an alcohol and drug counselor to help support myself to my higher educational goals. And so far it's working, and it's really amazing. So in my current job, I also do their social media. I saw that they needed some help with that, and I started doing a little bit on the side, and pretty soon, lo and behold, I get 10 hours a week to do social media. So that versatility I have found has been really helpful to me. Just going in and expecting to get an internship sometimes doesn't work. So I would suggest to anybody that's interested in being an alcohol and drug counselor to start thinking about where you want to intern, and perhaps going and volunteering there first, and getting familiar with the people there and showing them what you've got. Because there's a lot of alcohol and drug counselors out there. There's all the classes. How many classes are like packed full, right? Where the waiting list is like 10 people on the wait list. So, you know, to show that you have a good work ethic and that you can bring something unique is really important. And I think the most important thing that I learned was that you have to bring your heart, and you have to be present, and you have to be healthy emotionally, physically, because it can be a really stressful and draining job. So I just keep growing and evolving and trying to stay in wherever I'm supposed to be. But as it stands right now, I'm pretty happy right where I'm at. So that's my story.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sandy. You talk about being lucky, but I really hear you creating your luck. And that thing that you said about, you know, an internship and, you know, it being a competitive field for alcohol and drug counselors, that's true for any field right now. It's a competitive job market, and that even means a competitive internship market. And I really like that model of like showing up at a place that for some reason you connect to it and saying, hey, what can I do here? Can I help out here? Can I volunteer? And I know a lot of people, including you and including me, who have gotten jobs that we really love by doing that. So it's a model, it's a proven model. You know, it doesn't work, it's not a guarantee, but it's something that really works. So I really encourage you, even if you're not interested in alcohol and drug counseling, to do that, jump in. We're at the portion of questions at this point, and if you guys don't have any, I have tons, but it looks like we got a hand right there.
How do or did you pay for school? Like how you pay for it? Like all three of you, I guess.
Well, my parents paid for my BA degree. My master's degree I usually did work study or got student loans. I did both. And it takes a while to pay them off, that's for sure. Good question. And it's not getting any cheaper, that's for sure.
I did a lot of financial aid too. I got scholarships, I got grants, I got loans. And that was for my bachelor's degree. I did work study. I found anything I possibly could, any form of financial aid I could possibly get, I went for. It helped a lot. My master's degree, luckily, while I was working for Pacific Bell, they had a program where they would pay for me to go to school. I was supposed to stay there. They changed that program later. But again, there are employers who will pay for your education. If you're a regular, I don't know, you know, the companies all have their own policies, but there are employers who, if you are a full-time employee, and they will help you pay for your education. They are out there. So just about anything I could possibly look for, I used.
I'm trying to get comfortable standing in front of large groups of people, so I'm just going to stand while I talk. So I took advantage of the financial aid packages here with minimal loans for City College because it gets more expensive, you know, as you go through your education. That being said, I also applied for scholarships here, and I received a scholarship through City College. I also was one of the runners-up for the President's Scholarship, which they have at City College, which is a $10,000 scholarship. And so those things like getting involved in clubs and doing community service, and all of those things all add up to a scholarship package. I don't know if they still help do their essays here or at financial aid, but it's a relatively easy process to do scholarships here. And while I'm on vacation, I'm going to be seeing what kind of graduate scholarships I can get, because your financial aid is usually loans, from my understanding, when you go into a master's or graduate program, unless you can do scholarships. So we have a scholarship, or we did have a scholarship club here at the Career Center, so that might be something to look into also. So, and I worked part-time.
Yeah. I like how Sandy said on her vacation, she's going to be looking into what kind of scholarship she can get for her graduate school, because it takes time to get scholarships and grants and research where they are. And sometimes you get frustrated and you're like, oh, this takes too much time. But just think, if you've got a $10,000 scholarship, that's a pretty good rate of pay, even if you put a whole week into it. So you want to be thinking of it that way. It's going to take some effort, but hopefully you're going to really reap some rewards. More questions? Yes, Pascal.
I have a bachelor's degree, and I have a goal to go to graduate school at a kind of a special school, Naropa University. I don't know if you've heard of it, but in Boulder, Colorado. But they have a master's in divinity, and if I attend it like I plan to, I'll have a master's in divinity. And there's, I talk to the people somewhat, but I wouldn't be a counselor, but I would be a chaplain. I'd have some counseling training. But what I've been wondering about was, I tried to find out if there's any certificate counseling programs for people that have master's degrees. I wanted to have skill as a counselor, but I didn't want it as a full-time job. I'm more interested in running a meditation center, like to be a facilitator, working with people, have yoga classes and meditation, and be able to offer counseling as part of it. And plus, before I go to graduate school, I have a plan. There's a place called Southern California Counseling Center in the Santa Monica, Long Beach area, and they have a paraprofessional program, which is about my speed. It's 6 months of Fridays, and they said they developed the paraprofessional certification in California. They told me that. So I'm interested in that, but I don't want to do 1,500 hours. I don't want to be a therapist, but I want to have the skill to help people and to be able to give counseling legally.
Well, for one thing, in seminary they usually offer, if not require, something they call clinical pastoral education, where they send students off for a quarter to work in under supervision in hospitals and so forth, doing chaplaincy kind of work. And I think that that's very, very valuable in itself. And also I took counseling, I took pastoral counseling, and I also took marriage counseling when I was in seminary. So that they should offer some counseling courses. In terms of the hours, if you have an ordination, you don't need a license because of the separation of church and state. And so if you go on and get ordained, you can counsel anywhere, as long as you're doing pastoral counseling, because of the separation of church and state. The license, nowadays California's developing, I think, the licensed professional counseling. I'm not sure how many hours they require in terms of supervised internship for that.
Well, would any of you know of a website? I found one counseling, like United States Counseling Group, but they wouldn't recommend any programs. Is there any, could you help me some other time, like maybe if I visited you in your office? By the way, I have a friend that teaches at GTU.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a Buddhist, Bhante Silavimala, he teaches there. I have a lot of respect for, I used to live in the Bay Area, and I used to visit that campus. It's an interesting.
It's a wonderful place, north side there.
Pascal, we're going to move on. We have some more questions, one right here.
Yes, I was interested in therapy as a private practice, and I was wondering if you have to kind of like cope with dealing with other people's issues, or if it was a hard way going about analyzing and giving advice to people.
Well, one of the things that that I tell my clients is that what I provide is a safe place for them to tell me what's going on. And I really tell them that I'm not going to give them advice, that they actually have all the answers to what they need in order to get to where they want to go. I'm just like a sounding board. So I always work with my clients to help them remember that they have the power to change. They're the people who are going to change. It's not the therapist. That's my perspective on therapy. And when you go to other therapists, they might have more or different types of perspectives or approaches to therapy. There's different ways to approach therapy. Again, my personal opinion is we are there and we try to be as objective as possible and just create a safe place and help the person process whatever it's going through. And if you want to get into counseling, you are going to be, the reason you're there is to hear their issues. You got to hear their issues. And sometimes you don't like what you hear.
Isn't it true that on the path to becoming a therapist, you also are going to be required to go through the therapeutic
Yes.
process yourself, and so you'll have a chance to kind of be in that seat as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
I tell my students over and over again that the most important aspect of my training has always been and continues to be the working through of my own process.
Yeah, because I imagine it's got to be really stimulating when other people are telling you things to kind of hear and go, wow, I do that too. Or
Yes. Well, if somebody comes to me and has an issue that I haven't dealt with, it's going to trigger me for one thing, and I'm probably not going to be much help to that client.
Yeah, at my current place of employment also, self-care is essential and really encouraged, and therapy is required while it's not, in the rules, but it's a requirement that you're in therapy while you're dealing with that, particularly with not being an MFT and hearing a lot of trauma, which we hear in the alcohol and drug counseling, and especially particularly with women, that it's really important to take care of ourselves.
Did we answer your question?
Yeah, from this one.
Okay, another question here. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, one of my teachers said there's different types of license. That one, you are more employable by like the state or like the government, and then one it's like harder to get like a private practice. I don't know if that's wrong. Or which like license?
They're different levels,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of a mixed bag, I guess. But the highest level, other than being a doctor or a physician, is a psychologist, which is a PhD. Being a psychologist, being a licensed psychologist, licensed by the state. Then comes underneath that the master's level, which would be licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed clinical social worker, and then under those would be the, I guess, the new licensed professional counselors and the alcohol and drug counselors and other kinds of specialties. So at the master's level, both that licensed clinical social worker or a licensed marriage and family therapist, they are allowed to have private practice, but also to receive third-party payments, which means we can get paid by insurance companies for our services. And then so it goes down from there.
Can I ask, what is the educational requirement for academic counselors?
We have to have a master's degree. A master's degree in, typically the job descriptions will ask that you have a master's degree in some area of counseling. It can be counseling. There is marriage and family therapist types of counseling. That degree would also allow you to be an academic counselor. There is another degree that maybe Gordy, you know it. It has specific, it's specifically associated with teaching at the city college level. That's another master's program.
It's probably an education degree of some kind.
Yes,
Okay.
uh-huh.
So
But-
different. So there's a different path for that, and you don't necessarily have to have gone through the 3,000 hours of marriage and family
That's right.
licensing.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
If you have a bachelor's degree in something other than psychology, can you go directly into a master's degree, or?
I did.
is there-
I did a BA in English.
So you don't have to take, I mean, is it recommended to take?
It's recommended to have some background in psychology and/or other social sciences.
And it may too depend on the master's program that you search out. It could be that some master's programs would require more prerequisites than others.
Okay.
And not making one any better than the other, it's just their philosophy behind their educational program.
Yes.
I have a question. Actually, how do therapists cope with the issues that you hear from clients? Do you feel like that adds an activity to your life, or do you feel that this is actually more rewarding, doing this kind of work?
I think when we first begin to be counselors, I can't speak for everybody. I'll speak for me.
That's
There-
very professional of you.
It was harder to let go of the things that people would bring in. It would stay with me longer, and it can get on your mind. It can bring you down. One of the reasons I don't do therapy full time is because, for me, I couldn't do it full time because it's just it does soak me sometimes. And so that's why I've been fortunate enough to create a life where I do academic counseling, which is very detailed, and then the personal counseling, and it's only part-time on each side. But it is important for us to find ways to keep ourselves healthy. Like Gordy said, we got to keep processing stuff too, because there's stuff that gets triggered, and we have to be as healthy as we possibly can so that we can be healthy for our clients.
Right, so a good balance of getting enough sleep, getting enough recreation, time with family, that kind of thing. Getting out of town, that kind of thing. It really helps maintaining some sort of balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have an AA in psychology, and I'm looking at transferring to the Channel Islands or Antioch to continue on with my BA. I mean, is there any employment with just AA, or rather than, coupling it with the alcohol and drug? I mean, would that be like some kind of an internship? Or, I mean, obviously I can't work in an office,
Yeah, the quickest way to work in the field, I find, is alcohol and drug counseling.
Mhm.
Is that you can get hired today, and then you have 6 months to register with one of the certifying agencies in California. There are 9 of them. And then 5 years to get your certificate. That's what the law says. But you can actually start working hands-on today if you'd like to. So alcohol and drug counseling is the quickest way to do that.
Right, okay. So to continue on with the BA is making a lot
The more education you get, the better.
Right.
The higher you go, then the better jobs you can get.
Here's another two-part question. Can I have a two-part?
Yeah, go for it.
Who makes the most money?
It's not the alcohol and drug counselors. I'll tell you that
We're
right
working
now.
on that. No, it's getting better. I tell you, it's getting better.
Can I interject here?
Uh-huh.
I today went on the Katie site, and anybody that's interested in the alcohol and drug counseling, they just revamped their site because it was pretty terrible, and it's pretty fabulous now. And it really goes into detail all the different levels that you can get. For instance, if you have your AA, your CATSI 1.
You want to do that? You
And
guys wanna go there, or?
No, I was going to, it's the California Association for Alcohol Drug Educators, known as CAADE, KD.
KD.
Oh, KD.
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 Right.
And the certification is Certified Addiction Treatment Counselor.
Okay.
So you can do level 1 when you have your bachelor's degree, is another level, a master's degree is another with just your alcohol and drug counseling certification. But the site is really marvelous to navigate and ask. It has a lot of questions and answers, and that
Yeah.
was really helpful. Yeah.
You have a question?
Yeah, are there any kind of programs where you can travel to, like, say, third world countries, or to go all around the world and still see patients, but not necessarily be locked into like a 9-to-5 private practice type thing?
Not officially,
No.
but I think it is possible to do that through faith-based organizations.
Like the Peace Corps?
Yeah, well, the Peace Corps is actually the government, but I don't know that the Peace Corps actually does counseling. They do health work, and they also do teaching, but I've never heard of the Peace Corps doing actual counseling.
Yeah, I looked all over, I couldn't find it.
But but going with, say, being sponsored by a church to go somewhere to work, that could be a possibility.
What about people who go to trauma sites or natural disaster sites and do on-site counseling? Those are people usually who have another job, though, like a private practice or
Right,
something.
or people who have been trained
Yeah.
in some way.
No, I want to get, I mean, after you get your degree, you go,
Yes.
get, I'm thinking like PhD, and then from there go do something like that.
Yeah, and I think there are some private foundations that do that kind of thing.
And
But I'm offhand, off the top of my head, I can't think of any.
You might find there was a period, probably about a year ago, where the U.S. government was recruiting marriage and family therapists because of all the guys coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq. So there was a lot of cases of PTSD and a lot of family issues as well. Guys returning back, and women returning back to their families. So there was a recruitment drive, and a lot of marriage and family therapists were hired by the U.S. government, and they were sent to military bases. And part of that program, you could request to be sent to military bases in Europe. So there were a couple of, again, hiring times, periods when that was taking place. I haven't heard any more, but I would assume that for the next few years, there's still going to be a big call for those of us who have some good background in PTSD, especially PTSD treatment.
Post-traumatic stress
I'm
disorder,
sorry.
yeah.
Can I interject here? I like your style, by the way. I think that's great. At Antioch, it's really a social justice kind of school, and they encourage, we've had a lot of students that have started their own nonprofits, which would be a great thing to do. There's the Invisible Soldiers program where they deal with a lot of PTSD, the children or the young children in Africa that are recruited to fight in wars. And so there's a lot of, like UNICEF, there's a lot of those programs that you can travel with, and if you don't see something that fits exactly what you want, I encourage you to try to create it.
Wow,
Yeah.
Good. Well said.
Yes.
On a slightly different note, I was wondering what segment of your education you found most helpful in like was it all of the hours that you had to volunteer? Was it class time? Like which type of education was most helpful to you as counselors?
I would have to say practical experience.
I'm sure.
Working in the field, and then going into the classroom, it kind of confirmed some of the things that we were learning in the field. I was lucky enough to get most of my MFT hours while I was working in treatment. And it was a great experience because I was getting paid for that, but also, I mean, finding internships that you get paid for are really nice. But
sure.
just learning the ropes and learning by doing, I really think is important.
Yeah, and then secondly, I'm sorry I got here so late, but I was just wondering if one would get a master's in counseling, would one be eligible for all different types of counseling? I'm sure you guys covered this, I feel stupid, but is it not just kind of therapy? Is it also kind of academic counseling? career counseling, like all different?
Well, you know what, it could depend on the master's program that you get into. My master's program was in a school of education rather than a school of psychology. So even though we had really good, it came from a what's called a family systems perspective. That was the primary theoretical orientation. But of course, we learned a lot about all sorts of different approaches to therapy. But fortunately, mine also included the marriage and family therapist option, and also what's called a PPS credential, which is a pupil personnel services credential, which gave you training so that you'd be qualified to work at a an elementary any school in the public school system in California. You needed that credential. So it depends on the master's program, but you probably missed my part was I was never trained as an academic counselor. I was trained to be a marriage and family therapist, but I had the minimum requirements. I had a master's degree in counseling, and it's just putting yourself out there. It's trying things. It's getting to know people. It's volunteering and saying, hey, let me shadow you for a while. And you get to know people. You get to network. And you have opportunities to be trained. We're always training. Where we have to do 36 hours of education every 2 years. And then whatever we do on our own, we have to keep on educating ourselves. And that's how you grow, and that's how you become a more well-rounded therapist. That's how you get into positions where you can make more money, is by, you know, it's not all just about what master's degree. I'm sure that there are some MFTs out there who have made really good names for themselves, who are possibly making more money than a PhD. It depends on how much you put into it, how much training you give yourself, and what name you make for yourself out there.
Marriage and family therapists these days average somewhere between $120 and $150 an hour.
Wow, that's strange.
I'd like to say something to address that. I just received career counseling last Friday here from Chris Phillips at the Career Center here, and he told me, I said, I'm concerned about going and getting an MFT because supposedly there's more MFTs per capita in Santa Barbara than anywhere. And he said, well, that's true. However, you can do many things with your MFT. And being licensed and showing that you've done something and that you're licensed, you can personalize your MFT to however you wish. And oftentimes seeing that you have your license and that you've gone through the whole thing, and then you can kind of, I don't know, personalize it and bring your own personality into your MFT. So it's kind of like a vague or
as I did with alcohol and drug counseling.
Yeah, so.
But I think it's also probably wise to have some idea what kind of counseling you want to do, and then choose your school from there. Yeah.
And if you don't have an idea, I mean, make that your first order of business as you're in school, you know, is like kind of experimenting and finding your way through that. We probably have time for one more question, and then we're going to wrap things up. And does anybody have a burning question?
Would it be, I'm sorry. Would it be smarter to, like, I'm just starting back at school. I've worked for a long time, but went back, and then now I'm back in school. Done things in the past, like with helping out people or whatever, and kind of was like interested in that. Is that something where I could get started now on that, even though I've got my general education plan going, basically right now to get my A in my general education so I can transfer into whatever I want? But would it be good to maybe like take summer school to get like a jump ahead, or maybe even like pick up an extra class on counseling to like start now?
Sure. I mean, I think I can never get enough education. And if I'm interested in something, why not, try it out? Come take some of our courses. We'd love to have you.
And also doing internships. That's a great way to say, okay, is this the field I want to be in? Do I like, or is this my tribe? Do I like working amongst these people and with these clients?
And how would we go about doing an internship if like we were interested?
Well, one is as Sandy was saying earlier, volunteering.
So
There are
just
lots of providers in town that will accept volunteers. That also, we send our students for specific traineeships while they're here, and then they can either, sometimes they get hired, as Sandy did, sometimes they continue on and get fulfill more of their state required hours at the same place. I got my job at Project Recovery back in 91, 92 by volunteering there for 6 months first, and then getting hired.
And we can help you here in the Career Center, giving you ideas on finding internships or volunteer work. There's also a job fair coming up April 24th on West Campus. You'll receive an email about that. You might want to stop by there because we usually have a good showing of a variety of employers in town, some of which are nonprofits and places that would hire potential therapists and counselors. So we're going to close our official part of the program. I really want to thank all of you for spending your time with us this afternoon. I really want to thank our 3 presenters, and I want to give them an official Career Center career duck.
Oh, good.
Yay,
Oh, yes.
for ducks.
It may not be your chosen career, but they're
right.
cute. So thank you very much, and you know, probably they can answer a few quick questions if you still have some time. Thank you.